Hey guys, you're on a scripted channel, and here we try to make sense of AI. What is that most important thing that is happening in the world of AI right now? What is that thing that we all shall be paying attention to? Is it some sort of a new LLM model? Well, not really. What I'm going to tell is going to surprise you, because the most important thing now may be the CPU degradation bug, also known as instability issue. So technically, we shouldn't care much about Intel, right? Because, well, Intel is all about CPUs and AI is all about GPUs, so we're not really interrelated directly. However, Intel, for a long time, they have been claiming that they do have AI ambitions. And this is why we on this channel, we've been researching them, we've been keeping an eye on them. And what we have learned may explain what is happening behind that CPU degradation issues, CPU instability. Don't get me wrong, we're not hardware guys or engineers, no, we're just simply AI guys, which is why we have that slightly different angle at the problem. As you will see, this is not just a CPU issue, no, it's actually much deeper. If we're right, this bug, it will affect the entire AI industry. It all started last year. At first, just a few gamers complained that they got kicked out from a game with an unusual error message, like a message error that nobody's seen before. Nobody took them seriously, like, hey, come on, gamers complaining that they got kicked out from a game, right? Gamers complaining, they always complain. It's like coders and gamers, a cast of professional complainers, right? However, as more and more of them appeared, an interesting pattern started to form. It turned out that all of these unfortunate gamers, they all were running, they all had the same CPU, the most recent Intel CPU, generation 13 and 14 to be exact. Intel acknowledged the problem, they issued a note, but they didn't know what the problem was, they said. But they were working on it, they said. So stay tuned, they said. And then silence. The number of complaints snowballed until at some point we learned that it's not just gamers actually who are getting this error message and are getting kicked out from a game. No, it became known that hyperscalers or the data center operators, they're having the same problem. And that's where it became a very different story, because one thing is when a gamer is getting kicked out, right? Who cares? Just gamer got kicked out from a game, right? And it's a completely different story when you learn that a server, a cloud server with, say, a banking application running on it is getting the error message and is getting kicked out. So these days, pretty much everything is run on the cloud. And that means that everybody got affected. And that's how it became serious. An interesting fact, this error appeared on processors that previously were working absolutely fine. So it appeared like as if these processors initially were working fine, and then for some reason they started degrading. It's almost like as if they started getting old, and they were aging like 10 times faster than processors normally do. And this is how this issue, this bug, got its name, a degradation bug. At the time of this video, it is still not clear how widespread this issue is. There are analysts who speculate that this might be an issue that covers all processors, all chips of the new generation. And it just that some of them, they already degraded to the level where they can no longer be used, while others are getting there. What makes it especially difficult to measure the scale of the issue is the fact that the data center operators, like the hyperscalers, they, for understandable reasons, they try to keep all these communications private. They don't want to ruin their relationship with their main supplier, which is Intel. And that's why basically they're trying to keep it under the rug, and they're trying to do that as long as they can. Intel is also trying to mute this problem, just trying to keep it low profile, not to attract attention to it. Time to time they post a note and they say like, hey, we're working on the issue, everything's fine, have a good day. So we don't really know, we still don't know what is the root cause of the issue. Well, you know what? Maybe we do. If you look at the companies that are driving the AI revolution, you will notice a very interesting thing, a very interesting pattern. Google, TSMC, Tesla, Nvidia, Microsoft, Facebook. What do they all have in common? Yes, that's right. They are all managed by the founders, the owners of the company. Well, technically, in case of Google, TSMC, and Microsoft, they have CEOs at a steering wheel. However, if we look closer, we will see that the founders, they're still around, and it is the founders who are making all core strategic decisions. AI has become a major inflection point that separates winners from losers destined for extinction. And the main reason why these companies, they managed to harness AI was because they were able to do something about it. So what exactly did they do to harness AI? Well, Google created Google Brain and TensorFlow and transformers and YouTube algorithms that we saw in previous videos. Nvidia learned how to build, how to design GPUs, which is an engine of the AI. And then TSMC, they learned how to produce them, how to manufacture these GPUs. Tesla learned how to create driverless cars, and so on. So these decisions, they are kind of obvious now, retrospectively. And now we think, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, of course. It's obvious, right? But back then, they were extremely unconventional. Can you imagine the amount of effort and courage that were needed to push them through, to risk the status quo and to plunge into this ocean of uncertainty, ocean of unknown? And the only reason why these companies, they made these decisions and they were successful in executing them was because these decisions were made by their owners, well, by their founders. How this is all relevant to the degradation bug, you may ask? Well, there was time when Intel was run by founders. First by Robert Noyce, then by Gordon Moore who created the Moore law, then by famous Andy Grove. Well, technically, Andy was not a founder, but he was with Intel since day one, and he was the first employee of the company. So de facto, he was a founder. Andy passed away in 2016, and since then, Intel has been run by hired managers with no supervision from the founders. So while all these successful AI companies, while they were navigating the AI inflection point, what Intel was busy with, I will tell you. In 2018, Intel fired their last professional CEO from that founder's time, and it was not just professional but also tech-savvy CEO with engineering background, a CEO who who was with the company since 1980s. What was that terrible thing, that unspeakable crime that CEO committed, so that Intel had to force one of the most valuable employees, who gave the company like 35 years of his life? So what was that terrible thing? And here I will speak slowly, very slowly. He had a romantic affair with a colleague, consensual affair. Intel had the rule, like an internal rule, that was against colleagues having relationships. And that's why he was fired. But an interesting thing is that that rule was introduced long after that relationship happened. long after that relationship ended. So the CEO, at the time when that relationship happened, he did not violate anything. That rule was introduced way later, way after that. And yet, Intel fired him because of violating the rule that would have been introduced like years later. Do you know why? Do you remember what was happening back then in 2018? Yeah, this was happening. That was an epicenter of the Me Too movement, that overall flourishing of the cancel culture. So nobody in Intel, nobody stood up and nobody tried to defend their CEO. Not just any person. He was like one of the most professional engineers in a company. He knew all the ins and outs. He knew the business, the technology. He knew the company, the people. And yet, nobody defended him. Because at that time, it was like an equivalent of a corporate suicide. If you get on the radar of these cancel culturists or Me Too activists, you're done, you're cooked. The heads were flying left and right. So nobody stood up. And they sacked him. And do you know whom they replaced him with? Like, who was the new CEO they appointed? You're never going to believe it. This is just, I remember that time when I saw this back then, and I couldn't believe my eyes. They replaced a professional engineer with like decades of experience in the field, knowing company, knowing business, knowing everybody. They replaced him with an accountant who had exactly zero experience in semiconductors. Zero. And he became a new CEO. He became the person who was making decisions about everything, about the strategic movement, direction of the company. An accountant. Here you may think I made it up. I agree. It sounds surreal. It sounds like a science fiction. Well, like an opposite of a science fiction. Yet it is real. It happened. Go and watch this interview. I promise you're not going to regret it. It's not going to be a waste of time. There's going to be a link in the description. And that interview is it's all you need to understand what are the roots of the Intel CPU degradation bug, the bug that we see now in 2024. Don't get me wrong, I am a strong supporter of egalitarian and the meritocracy culture. What I do not support is when these principles, when these values are being deformed beyond recognition and used by some group of activists as a weapon to advance their own interests and benefits. And what happens in this case, Intel is an example of what happens when they succeed and they substitute the interests of business with their own interests. And when they replace a professional CEO with an accountant with absolutely no experience in the industry. And what happened after that, that's history. Intel completely missed the AI revolution. Basically, Intel does not exist in the AI world. There's not a single LLM model, like state-of-art LLM model out there that was trained using Intel chips. Not a single one. What is even more interesting is that Intel, even in the world of CPUs, Intel is no longer knows how to manufacture modern chips. The most recent technologies, the most recent chips that Intel can manufacture en masse is 10 nanometers technology. 10 nanometers. TSMC, its competitor, was able to do that technology back in 2016, 8 years ago. So what Intel was busy with back then, well, we have just seen it. It was busy getting rid of his last professional engineer CEO and replacing him with an accounting person with zero experience in the semiconductor industry. Now, 8 years later, the best processors, the best CPU that Intel can make is 10 nanometers, like on mass production. TSMC at the same time now manufactures en masse processors with 3 nanometers technology. And that's technology that ChatGPT is using, for example. In the world of AI, the difference between 10 nanometers and 3 nanometers is pretty much the same as the difference between bicycles and Tesla. So here you may ask, like, hey, what's the cause of that CPU degradation bug? What's the roots of it? Well, these are the roots of it. That's the reason why this entire situation exists. Intel is making mistakes. Intel degraded. Intel got old. Companies get old. Just like chips, like people and entire countries, companies get old. And when they do get old, they begin to make mistakes. They begin to pursue not the business objectives, but they start making decisions because of interest of some influential groups, either within the company or outside. They become very easy targets for manipulation. And they start getting rid of talented and professional, hardworking people and replacing them with opportunistic speculators and populists who pursue their own agendas and try to extract value for themselves. It's like the corporate sabotage, basically. And that's what happened to Intel. Intel got old. To be fair, eventually Intel realized that they made a mistake and they tried to fix it. So they terminated that accountant and they replaced him with a professional engineer. However, the problem is that semiconductor companies, they are like tankers, huge, massive tankers, and it's extremely difficult to change the direction of that tanker. So basically, if you make a decision now, for example, some strategic decision, the result of that decision will surface only like a decade later. And that's pretty much what is happening now. The mistakes that Intel made back then in 2018, mistakes of that accountant, that mistakes, they are surfacing now. And that bug degradation issue, the roots of that are there in 2018. Why do we care, you may say? Why do we even care about Intel? History is full of corporate names that got shredded by time and entropy, and nobody even remembers them anymore. For example, who remembers Nortel or BlackBerry or Kodak or Yahoo or General Motors and so on? Like this list, like huge. They no longer exist. Like literally, nobody cares about them. Well, the problem with Intel is that here's how the AI chip industry looks like. There are two main manufacturers. One is TSMC and another is Intel. Like second, very, very distant second is Intel. The problem with TSMC, with the leader, is that it is located on an island called Taiwan. And that island is believed by one country to belong to that country. And that country is China. So if anything goes wrong with this entire situation, and for whatever reason that TSMC is no longer available, then Intel automatically becomes like a plan B for, well, frankly, a plan C and plan D as well, for America and for the entire Western civilization. This is, by the way, the reason why recently American government gave like $8.5 billion of grant to Intel to build new facilities that are capable of manufacturing advanced AI chips like 3 nanometers and below. So it's basically Intel is a backup for manufacturing AI chips, backup for the entire Western civilization. The Western world relies on Intel. We all expect Intel being able manufacturing, producing those advanced AI chips. However, from the CPU degradation bug, we learned that there is a chance that Intel is no longer capable of making even the simplest, the outdated chips. That is obviously a problem. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm afraid I'm not. I suggest that starting from now, we all start following very closely this CPU degradation bug, because our future AI future depends on it.